Stop. Take a breath. Because 1 second of anger can destroy 10 years of hard work. That's exactly what almost happened to Ayan on a crowded evening when the city felt louder than usual. It had been one of those days that started heavy and only got heavier. The kind where nothing goes terribly wrong but nothing goes right either. From the moment Ayan woke up, there was a tightness in his chest. Bills waiting on the table. A call from his boss that felt more like a warning than a conversation. His son asking for help with homework when his mind was already exhausted. Even the tea tasted off. By the time he left the house, his patience was already worn thin. The city did not help. It never did on evenings like this. Traffic was stuck. Not slow. Not crawling. Completely stuck. Cars packed so tightly that even air felt trapped between them. Horns screamed from every direction. Some long and angry. Some short and sharp like insults. Motorbikes slipped through gaps that did not exist a second earlier. Vendors shouted. Engines overheated. The sun had dipped, but the heat stayed behind like it had nowhere else to go. Sweat rolled down Ayan's forehead and soaked into the collar of his shirt. He loosened it, then tightened it again without realizing. His fingers gripped the steering wheel harder than needed. His jaw clenched. Inside his chest, something dark was rising fast. Ayan was not a bad man. He had never thought of himself that way. He worked hard. Long hours. Honest work. He cared about his family deeply, even if he did not always know how to show it. He paid his bills. He helped his neighbors when he could. He tried to do the right thing. But like many people, he believed anger gave him power. He believed that if someone disrespected him and he stayed quiet, it meant he was weak. That anger was a way to protect himself. A shield. A warning to the world that he should not be messed with. That belief had followed him since his younger days. From schoolyard fights. From watching grown men shout to be heard. From a world that taught him silence meant losing. That belief was about to cost him everything. The car in front of him moved a few inches, then stopped again. Ayan leaned forward as if that would help. His phone buzzed. A message from his wife asking when he would be home. He glanced at it and felt a sudden stab of guilt. He typed a short reply and put the phone down, face up, like he might need to defend himself against it. That was when it happened. A bike came out of nowhere. It cut sharply in front of his car, so close that Ayan slammed the brakes without thinking. The tires screeched. His heart jumped into his throat. The rider turned his head and shouted something rude. Ayan did not even catch the words properly, but the tone was enough. The rider made a gesture with his hand and sped away, weaving through cars like the rules did not apply to him. For a second, everything went quiet. Then the noise came back twice as loud. Ayan felt his vision narrow. The edges of the world blurred. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. His hands trembled, not from fear but from something hot and electric. His mind stopped thinking and started reacting. How dare he? In front of everyone. Like I am nothing. Ayan's chest rose and fell quickly. His breath was shallow. His thoughts became simple and dangerous. I won't let this go. He opened the door and stepped out of the car. The heat hit him immediately. So did the stares. Drivers watching from behind windshields. A couple of people on the sidewalk slowing down to see what would happen next. Ayan did not care. All he could see was the bike a few cars ahead, stopped now, the rider looking back with irritation. Ayan walked fast. Each step felt heavy and light at the same time. Heavy with anger. Light with adrenaline. The rider noticed him coming and straightened up. He took off his helmet, revealing a young face. Early 20s maybe. Thin beard. Sharp eyes that flickered with confidence and challenge. What's your problem? The rider said loud enough for others to hear. Ayan opened his mouth, and the words came out before he could stop them. Harsh. Accusing. Full of everything he had been holding in all day. You could have killed someone, Ayan shouted. Do you drive like an animal everywhere? The rider laughed, a short, careless sound. Relax, uncle. Learn to drive. That word hit Ayan harder than the near accident. Uncle. Something snapped inside him. His fists clenched. His shoulders tightened. He stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat on the rider's temple, close enough to smell dust and petrol. People began to gather. A small circle forming. Phones coming out. Whispers spreading. This was no longer just between two people. It was becoming a scene. Ayan felt a strange sense of control in that moment, like he had finally taken something back. The anger pushed him forward, filled him with a loud confidence. Say something. Do something. Show him. Then, in the middle of all that noise inside his head, something else appeared. A memory. Not dramatic. Not forced. Just sudden and clear. His son's face that morning. sitting at the table, swinging his legs, asking if Ayan would come early to watch him practice cricket. The way his eyes had lit up when Ayan said he would try. Another image followed. His wife standing in the kitchen, tired but smiling, reminding him to drive safe. Then another. His father years ago, sitting quietly after losing his job because of a fight he never talked about again. The memories did not stop the anger, but they slowed it. Ayan noticed his breathing. Short, fast. He noticed his hands shaking. He noticed how everyone was watching now. Waiting. The writer said something else, mocking, dismissive. Ayan barely heard it. Inside, a different voice finally spoke. Softer but steady. If you take one more step, this changes everything. He imagined the headlines. The police station. The phone call home. His son asking questions he would not know how to answer. His wife's face not angry, just broken. He imagined 10 years of work. Early mornings. Late nights. All hanging by a thin thread made of pride. For the first time that evening, Ayan stopped. He did not shout back. He did not raise his hand. He simply stood there, chest heaving, eyes locked on the writer, and did nothing. The silence confused everyone, including the writer. What? The writer said. Nothing to say now? Ayan swallowed. His throat felt dry. His heart still raced, but the fire had shifted. It was still there, but it was contained. You're right, Ayan said, his voice lower than before. It's not worth it. The words surprised him as much as they surprised everyone else. The writer blinked, clearly not expecting that response. He hesitated, then scoffed and put his helmet back on. Whatever, he muttered. He started the bike and disappeared into traffic as quickly as he had appeared. The crowd slowly lost interest. People turned back to their cars. Phones went away. The city noise returned to its usual level. Ayan stood there for a moment longer, feeling exposed and empty at the same time. His legs felt weak. The anger drained out of him, leaving behind exhaustion. He walked back to his car and sat inside, closing the door gently. The familiar space felt different now. Quieter. Safer. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel and let out a long breath he did not realize he had been holding. That was close. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his wife. Everything okay? Ayan typed back slowly. Yes. On my way. As traffic finally began to move, Ayan drove differently. Slower. More aware. He noticed things he usually ignored. The orange glow of streetlights. A child asleep on the back of a motorbike, arms wrapped around his father. An old man crossing the road carefully, step by step. He thought about how close he had come to ruining everything over a moment that had already passed. At home, his son ran to the door when he heard the car. You're late, he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. I know, Ayan replied, kneeling down to hug him. He held on a second longer than usual. Later that night, after the house had gone quiet, Ayan lay awake staring at the ceiling. The scene replayed in his mind, but differently now. Not with anger. With clarity. He realized something that scared him and relieved him at the same time. Anger had never given him power. It had only given him the illusion of it. Real strength, he understood, was stopping himself when everything inside him screamed to explode. Real control was choosing what kind of man he wanted to be, even when it was hard. The next morning, the city was loud again. Traffic was bad again. People were careless again. But Ayan was different. Not perfect. Not calm all the time. Still human. But aware. And sometimes, awareness is enough to save a life. Ayan had been angry for as long as he could remember. Not the loud, obvious kind all the time. Sometimes it sat quietly inside him, like a clenched fist he forgot to open. Other times it burst out without warning, sharp and hot, leaving silence behind. But it was always there. A background noise in his life. So constant that he stopped questioning it. As a child, his anger came fast and loud. If a toy broke, he threw it. If he lost a game, he flipped the board. Someone said no, he cried, screamed, slammed doors. Adults called him difficult. Some said he would grow out of it. Others shook their heads and said he needed discipline. What no one really did was ask why he was so angry. Ayan did not know either. He just knew that anger felt powerful. When he shouted, people listened. When he glared, people stepped back. It made the world feel smaller, easier to control. As a teenager, anger became his shield. By then he had learned how to use it. He stopped crying. He stopped explaining himself. He raised his voice instead. His posture changed. His eyes hardened. People began to fear him, and he liked that. Fear felt like respect. Fear felt like safety. He walked through school hallways with a reputation. Teachers watched their words around him. Classmates avoided crossing him. A few admired him from a distance. He told himself this meant he was strong, untouchable. Inside, though, things were not so solid. He felt misunderstood, easily disrespected, always ready to defend himself against attacks that were not always real. A joke felt like an insult. Advice felt like criticism. Silence felt like rejection. Anger filled the gaps where patience should have been. At home it was worse. He fought with his brother over small things. Who ate the last piece of food? Who used whose charger? Who got more attention? Words turned into shouting matches. Shouting turned into slammed doors. His parents tried to intervene, but they were tired. Tired of repeating themselves. Tired of calming storms that never really passed. His father once told him quietly, "This anger will follow you if you don't face it." Ion rolled his eyes and walked away. He did not want lectures. He wanted to feel in control. By the time he entered the working world, anger had become part of his identity. People described him as intense, passionate, sometimes difficult, though rarely to his face. He worked hard, no one could deny that. He stayed late. He delivered results. He knew his job. But meetings made him restless. Feedback made his chest tighten. A small mistake from a colleague felt personal. His tone sharpened without him noticing. His words cut deeper than intended. People learned to walk on eggshells around him. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Jokes softened. Honest opinions disappeared. He noticed it, but instead of questioning himself, he blamed others. "They're too sensitive," he told himself. "They can't handle honesty. I'm just direct." Promotions slipped away quietly. Not announced. Not explained. Just given to someone else. Someone calmer. Someone easier to work with. Someone managers trusted to handle pressure without exploding. Each time it happened, anger rushed in to fill the disappointment. He blamed office politics, jealous coworkers, bad leadership, anyone but himself. At home, his marriage carried the weight of his moods. His wife learned to read the signs. The tight jaw. The short answers. The way he placed his keys on the table a little too hard. On bad days she spoke carefully. On worse days she stayed silent. They argued about small things that grew into big ones. Missed calls. Forgotten groceries. A comment said the wrong way. Ion always felt attacked. Always ready to defend. "I work all day," he would say. "I'm under pressure. You don't understand." She tried to tell him she did understand. That she just wanted peace. That she missed the man who laughed easily, the one who listened. But anger spoke louder than she ever could. Their son watched everything. Children always do. He noticed how his father's voice changed. How the air in the room shifted. How arguments ended with silence instead of solutions. He learned early when to stay quiet, when to disappear into his room, when to wait for a better mood. Ion told himself he was being a good provider. That was enough. That love did not need softness. "This is just who I am," he repeated like a shield against doubt. What he did not see was that anger was not protecting him. It was slowly isolating him. Friends stopped calling as often. Invitations came less frequently. Conversations stayed surface level. No one shared their problems with him anymore. He was the last to know things. The last to be included. He told himself he did not care. But late at night, when the house was quiet and his thoughts had room to move, something uncomfortable crept in. A sense of emptiness. A feeling that he was standing in the middle of his life, surrounded by people, yet somehow alone. He ignored it. Until life forced him to look. The warning signs came quietly at first. A colleague avoiding eye contact. His wife growing distant, not angry, just tired. His son hesitating before asking him questions. Small moments that should have meant nothing but added up to something heavy. Then came the meeting. It was supposed to be routine. A review. Feedback on a project he had poured himself into. He walked in confident, already rehearsing arguments in his head. Already defensive. The manager spoke carefully. Too carefully. "You do excellent work," she said. "But there are concerns." Ion felt the familiar heat rise. Concerns about what? He wanted to snap. She talked about teamwork, communication, trust. About how people felt intimidated. About how they hesitated to approach him. About how leadership was not just results but how you made others feel. He laughed. A short, sharp sound. "So I'm being punished for being honest?" he said. She met his eyes, calm and steady. "No," she replied. "You're being held back because people are afraid of you." The word hit harder than he expected. Afraid. He left the meeting angry, of course. Angry at her. Angry at the company. angry at a system that, in his mind, rewarded weakness. But something had cracked. That night, he sat alone in the living room long after everyone had gone to bed. The TV was on, volume low, images flickering without meaning. His phone lay untouched beside him. He thought about the word again. Afraid. He remembered his son freezing when Ion raised his voice. His wife's careful tone. His co-worker's silence. For the first time, a question slipped past his defenses. What if they're right? The thought scared him more than any argument ever had. Change did not happen overnight. It did not arrive as a sudden transformation or a dramatic decision. It came as discomfort, as awareness, as moments where he caught himself mid-reaction and felt ashamed. He noticed how quickly his chest tightened when things went wrong. How his first instinct was always to blame, to attack, to defend. He noticed how exhausted he felt afterward. How empty the victory of an argument felt. Anger had promised him strength, but it had delivered loneliness. The realization hurt deeply, because it meant facing years of choices, years of damage, years of pushing people away and calling it confidence. There were nights he lay awake replaying moments he could not take back, words he wished he could swallow, doors he had slammed too hard. He thought about his father's warning, long ignored. This anger will follow you if you don't face it. Facing it was harder than he imagined. It meant admitting fear. Fear of being disrespected. Fear of being overlooked. Fear of not being enough without the armor of anger. It meant sitting with discomfort instead of exploding. Pausing instead of reacting. Listening instead of winning. Some days he failed. He snapped. He raised his voice. He felt the familiar rush and hated himself for it afterward. Other days he succeeded. He took a breath. He walked away. He chose silence. Each small choice felt unnatural, like learning to write with his other hand. But slowly something shifted. His wife noticed first. The pauses. The apologies that came sooner. The way he listened without interrupting. They talked more. Not perfectly. Not easily. But honestly. His son started asking him questions again. Small ones at first. Then bigger ones. Ion learned to soften his voice, to kneel down, to explain instead of command. At work, he forced himself to listen through discomfort. To let others speak. To accept feedback without arguing back immediately. It felt like swallowing fire sometimes. But people began to relax around him. Trust, once broken, did not rush back. It crept. The worst part of change was the regret. The awareness of how close he had come to losing everything. How easily anger could have cost him his family, his career, himself. He understood now that anger had never been his personality. It had been his armor. An armor, worn too long, becomes a prison. Ion still felt anger. He probably always would. But now he saw it for what it was. A signal, not a command. A feeling, not an identity. He learned to stop. To breathe. To choose. And sometimes that choice made all the difference. Because he finally understood the truth that had taken him years to see. Anger does not protect you. It isolates you. And noticing the damage before it becomes irreversible is not weakness. It is the beginning of strength. Back on that crowded road, Ion chased the biker into a narrow side street. The main road noise faded behind him, replaced by the echo of his own footsteps and the sharp sound of his breath. His fists were clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. His jaw ached from being locked in place. His mind was loud, chaotic, filled with half-formed insults and threats that felt justified in the heat of the moment. He wasn't thinking about consequences. He wasn't thinking about home or work, or the promise he had made himself after so many close calls. Right now, all he could think about was the disrespect. The humiliation. The feeling that someone had crossed a line and needed to be put back in place. The biker slowed down, then stopped. The street was smaller than the main road. Quieter. Shops with half-closed shutters. A tea stall at the corner with a few plastic chairs stacked nearby. The kind of place where voices carried and tempers had nowhere to hide. The biker turned around slowly and took off his helmet again. His face was flushed, eyes sharp with irritation. He looked younger up close. Still confident, but now there was a hint of tension in his shoulders. They faced each other. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with everything unsaid. Then the words came rushing out. "What's wrong with you?" the biker snapped. "You think you own the road?" Ion stepped closer. "You think you can cut anyone off and just ride away?" Their voices rose quickly, overlapping, climbing over each other. Each sentence sharper than the last. Each word meant to wound. Ion felt his chest tighten, his heart pounding like it was trying to escape. This felt familiar. Too familiar. The same feeling he had known since childhood. The same rush that told him he was alive, in control, powerful. The biker shoved him lightly, more a warning than an attack. That was enough. Ayan shoved back harder. The space between them collapsed. The air crackled with tension. Hands pushed against chests. Feet shuffled aggressively on the dusty ground. It was no longer about the road or the bike or the insult. It was about pride now. About not backing down. About winning. Ayan's vision narrowed again. He could feel his arms tightening, ready. He knew what came next. He had been here before. The point where thinking stopped and instinct took over. Where one punch led to another and suddenly everything spiraled out of control. And somewhere deep inside, a quieter part of him whispered, "This is about to go too far." But the louder part drowned it out. Then a voice cut through the noise. Not loud. Not angry. Just steady. "Son, don't." The words were simple, almost gentle. But they sliced through the moment like a blade. Ayan froze. The biker hesitated too, his hands still raised but uncertain now. They both turned toward the sound. An old man stood a few steps away near the tea stall. He looked like he had been there the whole time, watching quietly. His clothes were simple, clean but worn. His back slightly bent with age. His hands rested calmly at his sides. What struck Ayan most was the man's face. His eyes weren't afraid. They were tired. Not the tiredness of a long day, but the kind that comes from carrying something heavy for many years. A deep, settled weariness. And beneath it, something else. Wisdom, maybe. Or loss. Ayan felt irritation rise again. "This is none of your business," he snapped, turning his anger toward the old man. "Stay out of it." The old man did not react the way Ayan expected. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply nodded slowly as if he had heard those words before. "I said the same thing once," the old man replied softly. Ayan scoffed. "Good for you." The old man took a small step closer. His movements were careful, unhurried. He looked directly at Ayan now, not accusing, not judging. "Cost me my son," he said. The words landed harder than any punch ever could. The street went quiet. Not just quiet in sound, but quiet in feeling. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and chest at the same time. Ayan felt the anger in his body freeze. It did not disappear. It stopped mid-motion like a fist paused inches from impact. His breath caught. His shoulders remained tense, but suddenly heavy. "Cost me my son." The biker shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. Even he seemed unsure now, the fire in his eyes dimming. Ayan tried to speak, but nothing came out. The old man did not rush to explain. He did not dramatize. He simply stood there, allowing the words to do what they needed to do. Finally, Ayan asked, his voice lower, rougher than before, "What do you mean?" The old man sighed, a slow, careful breath. "He was about your age," he said. "Hot temper. Good heart. Always thought anger made him strong." Ayan felt a strange tightening in his throat. "One evening," the old man continued, "a small argument. Road rage just like this. Words. Pushing. People watching." He paused, his eyes drifting somewhere far away. "One moment," he said, "everything was normal. The next, everything was gone." He did not say how. He did not need to. Ayan's mind filled in the blanks on its own. Sirens. A hospital. A phone call no parent should ever receive. The old man looked back at Ayan. "Anger is fast," he said quietly. "Life is fragile." Ayan felt something shift inside him. Not just fear. Recognition. He saw himself clearly in that moment. Not as the man he thought he was, but as the man he could become if he kept going this way. He saw his own son's face again. The small hands. The easy trust. The way he looked up to him. The biker cleared his throat awkwardly. "I didn't mean," he started, then stopped. He looked at the ground. "I was in a hurry." Ayan turned toward him slowly. The anger that had fueled his legs minutes ago felt distant now, like smoke after a fire. "Me too," Ayan said quietly. "I didn't handle it right." The words surprised both of them. The biker nodded once. "Sorry," he muttered. Ayan took a step back, creating space where moments earlier he had wanted none. "It's fine," he said. And for the first time he meant it. The biker put his helmet back on without another word and wheeled his bike away, slower this time. The engine faded down the street. Ayan remained standing there, his heart still racing but differently now. The adrenaline drained, leaving behind a deep, unsettling calm. He turned back to the old man. "Thank you," Ayan said. The old man gave a small, sad smile. "Just don't make my mistake," he replied. Ayan nodded. He did not trust himself to say anything else. As he walked back to his car, his legs felt heavy. The city noise returned gradually, but it sounded different now. Less aggressive. More distant. He sat in the driver's seat and closed the door, resting his hands on the steering wheel. They were still trembling slightly. That was too close. The thought echoed again and again. Too close to becoming a story someone else would tell with regret in their voice. As he drove home, memories flooded him. Every argument. Every slammed door. Every time anger had taken control and left damage behind. He saw how easily tonight could have been added to that list. Or ended it all. At home, his son was already asleep. Ayan stood by the door for a long moment, watching his chest rise and fall. He reached out and brushed a hand gently over his hair. "I almost failed you today," Ayan whispered. Later, lying in bed, the old man's words replayed in his mind. Anger is fast. Life is fragile. Ayan understood now that anger did not care about context. It did not care about years of effort or love or responsibility. It only needed a second. That night, something finally settled inside him. Not perfection. Not peace. But awareness. And sometimes, awareness arrives just in time to save everything. The old man sat down slowly on a nearby bench, the kind made of metal slats that had seen too many summers and too much rain. It creaked softly under his weight. He rested his hands on his knees, fingers thin, veins visible, hands that had done a lifetime of work and now carried a lifetime of memory. Ayan stood a few steps away, unsure whether to sit, unsure of almost everything in that moment. The anger that had filled his body minutes ago had drained out, leaving behind a strange mix of heaviness and vulnerability. His heart still beat fast, but now it felt exposed like a door left open. The old man looked up at him and began to speak. Years ago, he said, his son had a temper like fire. Just like that, the old man snapped his fingers gently. Quick, bright, dangerous. He talked without drama, without trying to command attention. His voice was calm, almost quiet, but each word carried weight. Ayan found himself leaning in without realizing it, as if the street around them no longer existed. "My boy wasn't bad," the old man said. "He was kind, actually. Helped neighbors. Loved his mother. Always laughing when he was calm." The old man paused, a faint smile crossing his face, then fading just as quickly. "But when anger came," he continued, "it took over everything. His eyes changed. His voice changed." He stopped listening. Ayan swallowed. The description felt uncomfortably familiar. "One evening," the old man said, "he went out angry. I don't even remember why. Something small. It's always something small." Ayan felt his chest tighten. "There was an argument," the old man went on. "Words were exchanged. People gathered. Pride took control." He looked down at his hands now, rubbing his thumb against his palm, as if feeling for something that was no longer there. "One wrong decision," he said softly. "One step closer than he should have taken. One push." The old man stopped speaking for a moment. The street was quiet except for distant traffic and the hiss of a kettle at the tea stall nearby. Ayan's ears rang with the silence. "A fall?" the old man finally said. He hit his head. The words felt sharp despite their softness. Ayan imagined it without wanting to. The suddenness. The shock. The way a moment could split life into before and after. "He didn't wake up," the old man said. "Gone." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Ayan felt his throat tighten, his eyes burn. He had not known this man 5 minutes ago, but the pain in his voice felt real, lived in, like something that never truly healed. "I wake up every day," the old man continued, "wishing I had taught him one thing. Just one." His voice cracked slightly, the calm finally breaking. Ayan took a step closer without thinking. "What?" he asked, his voice shaking despite his effort to keep it steady. The old man looked up at him again, his eyes wet but clear. "Never get angry," he said. "Because anger never hits only one target. It destroys everything nearby." The words landed deep. Not loud. Not dramatic. Permanent. Ayan felt something crack inside him. Not a break that shattered him completely, but a fracture that let light in. For the first time he saw anger clearly. Not as strength. Not as protection. But as a wild animal he had been feeding his entire life. Giving excuses. Giving space. Letting it grow bigger and hungrier. He saw how often he had unleashed it without thinking of the damage. How many people had been caught in its path. How close his own life had come to moments like the one the old man described. His son's face flashed in his mind. Sleeping peacefully. Trusting completely. Unaware of how fragile everything really was. The biker shifted his weight nearby, clearly uncomfortable now, like someone who had walked into a room they didn't belong in. He avoided eye contact, his earlier confidence completely gone. "I should go," the biker muttered. No one stopped him. He wheeled his bike away quietly, the engine starting low and careful, nothing like before. In seconds he was gone, swallowed by the city. The moment passed. But the message stayed. Ion sat down on the bench beside the old man. He did not ask permission. It just felt right. "I thought anger made me strong," Ion said quietly. "I thought it protected me." The old man nodded. "It feels that way," he said. "Until it takes something you can never get back." They sat in silence for a while. Not awkward. Not empty. The kind of silence that allows truth to settle. Ion thought about his childhood. About being the loudest to avoid being hurt. About learning early that fear could look like respect. About never being taught another way. He thought about his adult life. The arguments. The strained relationships. The opportunities lost without explanation. The distance he had blamed on others. "I don't know how to stop," Ion admitted. The old man turned slightly toward him. "You don't stop feeling angry," he said. "You stop letting it decide for you." Ion nodded slowly. "That's the hard part," the old man added. "Choosing differently when everything inside you wants to explode." Ion exhaled, a long breath that felt like it came from somewhere deep. They stood up together eventually. The old man moved slowly, carefully, but with dignity. Ion offered an arm, and the old man accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you," Ion said again, this time with more weight behind the words. "Just remember," the old man replied, "anger is fast. Regret is slow. It lasts." Ion watched him walk away down the street, blending into the evening like someone who had delivered a message and completed his task. On the drive home, the city looked the same, but Ion felt different inside it. Traffic lights. Pedestrians. Noise. All of it still there. But his reactions were quieter. More distant. He replayed the old man's words again and again. Anger never hits only one target. At home the lights were on. His wife was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. She looked up when he entered, reading his face the way she had learned to do over years. "You okay?" she asked. Ion nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking." She studied him for a moment, then nodded back. No pressure. No questions. Later, Ion stood by his son's bed watching him sleep. The steady rhythm of his breathing calmed something inside him. He reached out and rested his hand lightly on his son's back. "I'm trying," Ion whispered. "I promise." That night he did not sleep easily. Memories surfaced. Moments he wished he could undo. But for the first time the regret did not paralyze him. It motivated him. He understood now that change was not about becoming calm overnight. It was about catching the moment before it turned into damage. About pausing. About choosing. The old man's story became a line he carried with him. In traffic. At work. At home. Whenever his chest tightened and his jaw locked. Some days he succeeded. Other days he failed and apologized faster than before. But he never forgot that evening. The bench. The tired eyes. The simple truth delivered without anger. The moment passed. But the message stayed. And sometimes, that is enough to change the direction of a life. Changing wasn't easy. Ion learned that the very next day. He woke up feeling different but not lighter. If anything, he felt exposed. Like he had put down a weapon he had carried for years and wasn't sure how to stand without it. The memory of the old man's eyes stayed with him as he got dressed. Tired. Calm. Heavy with truth. Anger is fast. Life is fragile. He repeated the words quietly while tying his shoes, as if they might slip away if he didn't hold on to them. The drive to work was tense. Traffic crawled, horns blared, and more than once his jaw tightened out of habit. Each time he caught himself. Breathed. Looked ahead. It felt unnatural, like forcing himself to write with his left hand. Possible but awkward. By the time he reached the office he was already tired. Work had a way of testing him even on good days. That morning it didn't wait long. During a team meeting, a colleague pointed at a report on the screen and said, casually but clearly, "This delay is because Ion didn't send the data on time." The words hit his chest like heat. His stomach dropped. His heart jumped. That familiar burn spread through his body, quick and automatic. His jaw tightened. His hands curled slightly on the table. Not again. He knew without checking that it wasn't true. He had sent the data. On time. He remembered double-checking it the night before. He could already feel the argument forming in his head. The sharp tone. The facts lined up like bullets. This is unfair. Everyone's watching. If you stay quiet, they'll think it's true. The old anger knocked, loud and familiar. For a second he almost welcomed it. It felt like home. Like certainty. Like control. Then, just as quickly, another image surfaced. The old man's eyes. Not angry. Not accusing. Tired. Ayan swallowed. His chest still burned, but he didn't open his mouth. He didn't defend himself. He didn't attack. He paused. The room felt very quiet to him, even though others were still talking. He could hear his own breathing. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears. He pushed his chair back slightly and stood up. "I need a moment," he said, keeping his voice even. No one stopped him. A few people looked surprised. A few looked relieved. He walked out of the room and into the hallway. His steps were fast at first, then slower. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. It felt weak. It felt wrong. It felt like letting someone win. His mind screamed at him to go back in there and fix it. To defend his name. To prove he wasn't wrong. But he stayed where he was. He breathed in. Counted. Breathed out. The world didn't end. No alarms. No consequences. Just a hallway, quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. A few minutes later, his manager stepped out. "We're checking the email logs," she said calmly. "Looks like there was a mix-up." Ayan nodded, not trusting himself to speak yet. Later that afternoon, the colleague approached his desk. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I messed up. It was my mistake. Sorry for putting that on you." Ayan looked at him. Really looked at him. The man didn't look confident or powerful. He looked embarrassed. Human. "It's fine," Ayan said. And he meant it. After the colleague walked away, Ayan sat there for a long moment, staring at his screen. Something surprising settled in his chest. Silence had worked better than shouting. Not because it made him write faster, but because it kept him from burning everything down just to prove a point. His manager stopped by later that day. "Good job handling that," she said. "That took restraint." Restraint. No one had ever used that word for him before. The feeling stayed with him on the drive home. Quiet. Steady. Unfamiliar but not unpleasant. But anger doesn't disappear overnight. It tests you again and again. At home, the test came quickly. His son was doing homework at the table. Papers spread everywhere. Pencils rolling onto the floor. His wife was in the kitchen, juggling dinner and a phone call. Ayan walked in, already tired from the effort of holding himself together all day. "Dad?" his son said. "I don't get this." Ayan leaned over the book and saw the same question explained twice already. His chest tightened again. "We've gone over this. Why doesn't he listen?" "I'm exhausted." The old reaction rose up fast. The sharp tone. The impatience. "Pay attention," was right there on his tongue. He stopped. He saw the small crease between his son's eyebrows. The way his fingers gripped the pencil too hard. Not laziness. Confusion. Ayan pulled out a chair and sat down. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it together." It took longer than it should have. His son asked the same question more than once. Ayan felt irritation flare and fade, every time he chose. Later that night, his wife looked at him differently. Not suspicious. Just curious. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just trying something new." She smiled softly. I noticed. That smile stayed with him longer than any argument ever had. Still, anger kept testing him. In traffic when someone cut him off. At work when emails came in late. Online when strangers said things they would never say to his face. Each time the same moment arrived. The heat. The tightening. The urge. And then the choice. React or respond. Some days he chose well. Other days he failed. There were moments he snapped before he could stop himself. Times he raised his voice, slammed a door, typed a message he immediately regretted. The difference now was what came next. He noticed it. He apologized sooner. He didn't defend the behavior with excuses. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was on me." The words felt strange at first. Like admitting defeat. But something unexpected happened again. People leaned in instead of pulling away. Trust didn't rush back. It grew slowly, cautiously. Like an animal that had been scared too many times. Weeks passed. Ayan started noticing patterns. How anger showed up most when he felt disrespected. Or ignored. Or tired. How it was often fear in disguise. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing control. Once he saw that, it lost some of its power. He began to build small habits. Pausing before speaking. Breathing before reacting. Walking away when needed. None of it was dramatic. None of it made him perfect. But it made him present. One evening, stuck in traffic again, horns blaring like that night, Ayan felt the old tension rise. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, then loosened it. He thought of the old man on the bench, of the quiet street, of the story that had changed the direction of his life. He exhaled. At a red light, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked tired, but calmer. Older maybe. Wiser hopefully. At home, his son ran to him with a drawing. "Look," he said proudly. Ayan crouched down and studied it like it mattered. Because it did. "That's really good," he said. It was a small moment. Ordinary. Easy to miss. But it was built on dozens of choices that had come before it. That night, lying in bed, Ayan thought about the word strength. For years he had believed strength was loud. Sure. Unyielding. Now he was learning it could be quiet. That it could look like walking away. Like staying silent. Like choosing not to feed the wild animal inside you. Anger still lived in him. He didn't hate it anymore. He respected it. Watched it. Treated it like a signal instead of a command. Some days it whispered. Other days it shouted. Every day he had a choice. React or respond. And slowly, choice by choice, Ayan was changing his life. Ayan started observing his anger instead of obeying it. That shift did not happen all at once. It wasn't a clean decision or a sudden breakthrough. It was awkward at first. Uncomfortable. Like watching yourself from the outside and not liking what you saw. For years, anger had been automatic. Someone said something wrong and his body reacted before his mind even caught up. Chest tight. Jaw locked. Heat rushing upward. Words loading themselves like weapons. Now, instead of letting it drive, he began to pause and watch it arrive. The first few times, it felt almost unnatural. Like standing still while a strong wind pushed against him. He noticed how anger didn't start in his thoughts but in his body. A slight pressure behind his eyes. A clenching in his stomach. His shoulders rising without permission. Once he noticed it, he realized something else. Anger never arrived alone. It always came after something quieter. Fear. That realization hit him slowly, through patterns rather than logic. He began replaying moments in his head. Arguments at work. Tension at home. Random confrontations with strangers. Every time, there was fear sitting underneath the anger, like a hidden wire. Fear of disrespect. Fear of being dismissed. Fear of losing control. Fear of looking weak. Anger had been his response to those fears. A loud one. A dramatic one. A familiar one. One afternoon at work, a junior colleague interrupted him during a meeting. Just talked over him like his words didn't matter. Ayan felt the burn instantly. The old instinct surged up, sharp and ready. He paused. What am I afraid of right now? The question felt strange, almost silly at first. But he forced himself to answer honestly. I'm afraid I look unimportant. I'm afraid people don't respect me. I'm afraid I'm losing authority. The realization slowed him down. He waited until the colleague finished speaking, then calmly said, "Let me finish my point." No edge. No heat. Just clarity. The colleague apologized immediately. Ayan sat there, surprised. The anger had promised power. But calm had delivered it more cleanly. That's when the deeper understanding settled in. Anger wasn't strength. It was insecurity wearing armor. Once he saw it that way, everything shifted. He started treating anger like a signal instead of a command. When it showed up, he didn't shove it away, but he didn't obey it either. He got curious about it. What am I trying to protect right now? Sometimes the answer was real. At work, when deadlines piled up and pressure rose, he realized he was afraid of failing. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of losing the progress he had fought for. At home, when his son ignored instructions or pushed boundaries, the fear was different. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of raising him wrong. Afraid of becoming his own father in ways he had sworn he wouldn't. And sometimes the answer surprised him. Often there was nothing. Someone made a careless comment. A stranger was rude. A driver honked aggressively. What am I afraid of right now? He would ask himself. And the answer would come back quietly. Nothing. No real threat. No actual loss. Just pride flaring up out of habit. And when there was nothing to protect, anger lost its grip. It still showed up. It still knocked. But without fear feeding it, it didn't have much strength. Slowly, people noticed the change. At work, conversations became easier. People stopped bracing themselves when he walked into a room. They spoke more freely. They disagreed with him without flinching. And instead of feeling challenged, Ayan felt included. One colleague told him during a coffee break, "You're easier to talk to these days." It wasn't meant as an insult. It wasn't said carefully. It was just honest. Ayan smiled and said, "I'm trying." Trust returned in small ways. Emails became more direct. Meetings became more collaborative. His manager started looping him into discussions earlier instead of after decisions were made. He noticed something important. Calm didn't make him invisible. It made him reliable. At home, the change was even more noticeable. The house felt quieter but not tense. Quiet in a good way. The kind that allows laughter to exist. His son stopped hesitating before asking questions. He made mistakes more openly. He argued sometimes like all kids do but without fear in his eyes. One evening, his son spilled juice on the carpet. The old Ayan would have snapped instantly. The new Ayan felt the flash, recognized it, and saw the fear beneath it. "I'm afraid of mess. I'm afraid of losing control. I'm afraid I'll be blamed." He exhaled. "It's okay," he said. "Let's clean it up." His son stared at him for a second, then smiled with relief. That smile stayed with Ayan long after the carpet dried. His wife noticed it too. She stopped watching his mood so closely. Her shoulders relaxed around him. Conversations lasted longer. Silences felt safer. One night, sitting on the balcony, she said, "You seem lighter." Ayan thought about it. He didn't feel lighter exactly. He felt steadier. "I think I stopped fighting everyone," he replied. "Including myself." She reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. The anger still tested him. In traffic, when someone cut him off aggressively, the familiar heat flared. He asked himself the question, "What am I afraid of?" The answer came quickly. Nothing. He laughed softly at himself and let it go. Online, when someone left a rude comment under a post he shared, his fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to respond. He paused. What am I afraid of? Looking stupid. Looking ignored. Looking small. He closed the app instead. The urge passed. Ayan began to notice something else too. Anger used to feel big and loud because it distracted him from fear. But now that he faced the fear directly, it shrank. It became manageable. Human. He wasn't calm all the time. He still got frustrated. He still raised his voice occasionally. He still failed. But failure didn't spiral anymore. When he snapped, he owned it. I shouldn't have said that, he'd admit. That came from a bad place. I'm working on it. Those words built bridges faster than any apology shouted after damage was done. People trusted him not because he was perfect but because he was honest. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, Ayan passed the same side street where everything had almost gone wrong. The tea stall was still there. The bench still stood, worn and quiet. He slowed his steps for a moment. He wondered about the old man. Where he was now. Whether he knew how deeply his words had changed a stranger's life. Anger never hits only one target. Ayan carried that truth with him everywhere. He realized something else too. Calm didn't mean passivity. He still set boundaries. He still spoke up when something mattered. He still defended what was important. The difference was how he did it. Without fear. Without ego. Without the need to dominate. That kind of calm didn't make him smaller. It made him powerful. Not loud power. Not intimidating power. The quiet kind. The kind that steadies a room instead of shaking it. The kind that makes people listen without forcing them. The kind that protects without destroying. One evening, his son asked him, "Dad, why don't you shout as much anymore?" Ayan smiled. "Because I realized shouting wasn't helping," he said. "It was just noise." His son nodded like that made perfect sense. Later that night, lying in bed, Ayan thought about the man he had been for most of his life. The armor he had worn. The damage it had caused. He didn't hate that version of himself. That man had been trying to survive. Trying to protect something he didn't fully understand. Now Ayan understood better. Fear was part of being human. Anger was optional. And awareness was freedom. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, knowing tomorrow would bring new tests. New triggers. New moments where anger would knock. But now he knew how to answer. Not with obedience. With choice. And that choice changed everything. Months later, Ayan faced his biggest test. Not the kind that announces itself loudly. Not a dramatic confrontation on a crowded road. This one arrived quietly, disguised as a normal workday. Emails. Meetings. Coffee going cold on his desk. But underneath it, something heavy was waiting. Ayan had been working on the deal for years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. Late nights. Early mornings. Missed family dinners. Phone calls taken in parking lots. Spreadsheets revised again and again until numbers blurred together. He had built the project carefully, layer by layer, like something fragile that needed patience and attention. This deal was supposed to change everything. Immense stability. Recognition. A step forward that had been delayed too many times already. It meant proof, finally, that the quieter version of himself still had strength. That calm had not made him less capable. That morning, the meeting room felt tense even before anyone spoke. People sat stiffly around the table. Laptops open but untouched. Papers neatly stacked like no one had the energy to move them. Someone cleared their throat and didn't say anything. Ayan noticed it immediately. Something's wrong. His chest tightened, not with anger yet, but with awareness. He had learned that feeling. The moment before impact. The head of the department finally spoke. "There's been a problem," she said carefully. Ayan listened as the words landed one by one. A document missed. A deadline misunderstood. A critical error made by a partner team overseas. Not malicious. Not intentional. But real. The deal had collapsed. Just like that. Money lost. Not abstract numbers on a screen but real money. People's money. The company's trust. Months of momentum erased in a single paragraph. The room filled with quiet shock. Ayan felt it then. The old fire. It started exactly the way it always had. A sharp burn in his chest. A rush of heat up his neck. His jaw tightened so hard it hurt. His hands curled slowly into fists under the table. Everyone was watching him. He could feel it without looking up. Colleagues exchanging quick glances. Someone holding their breath. Someone else bracing for impact. They were waiting for the explosion. Ayan had earned that expectation over years. He knew it. He could almost hear the version of himself they remembered. The man who would slam his hand on the table. Raise his voice. Demand names. Assign blame loudly and publicly. Part of him wanted to do exactly that. He deserved to be angry, didn't he? It wasn't his mistake. Years of work, gone because someone else didn't do their job. The words lined up in his head, sharp and ready. This isn't acceptable. How could this happen? Do you know what you've cost us? For a split second, anger promised relief. The familiar release. The feeling of control that came with making others shrink. Then something else happened. Time slowed. Not magically. Not dramatically. Just enough for awareness to step in. Ayan noticed his breathing. Short. Fast. He noticed the way his shoulders had risen toward his ears. He noticed the fear beneath the anger. Fear of failure. Fear of humiliation. Fear that all his progress would vanish in one meeting. He remembered the old man's voice. Anger is fast. Regret is slow. He remembered the months of choosing calm. The awkward pauses. The uncomfortable silence. The small moments that had rebuilt trust piece by piece. He remembered how much he had to lose now. Ayan took a deep breath. Not the kind people talk about casually. A real one. In through the nose. Slow. Intentional. Long enough to interrupt the momentum inside him. He looked around the table. Everyone froze. Then he spoke. Let's fix what we can. The words were simple. Almost quiet. For a moment, no one reacted. The room went completely silent. Not the tense silence of fear, but the stunned silence of surprise. Ayan continued, his voice steady, even though his chest still burned. We can't undo what happened, he said. But we can decide what happens next. Let's focus on that. Someone blinked. Someone else shifted in their chair. The head of the department looked at him, surprised, then relieved. Okay, she said. Let's go through the options. The meeting changed tone instantly. Instead of blame, there was problem solving. Instead of raised voices, there were questions. People leaned in instead of pulling back. Ideas started flowing. Not perfect ideas. Not miracle solutions. But real ones. Ayan stayed calm, but he didn't disappear. He asked direct questions. He set boundaries. He made decisions. He held people accountable without attacking them. It wasn't easy. Every few minutes, the anger flared again, testing him. Say it. Push harder. Make them feel it. Each time he noticed it. Each time he chose differently. Hours passed. By the end of the day, the damage wasn't erased, but it was contained. A revised plan emerged. Losses reduced. Deadlines renegotiated. Most importantly, trust preserved. Jobs were saved. Including his own. As people filed out of the room, several paused to look at him. One colleague said quietly, I didn't expect that. Ayan nodded. Neither did I, he replied honestly. That night, he drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past the windows. Traffic moved steadily, almost politely, like the universe had decided to give him a break. His body finally started to relax, the adrenaline draining out slowly. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel now that the danger had passed. At home the house was quiet. His wife had left dinner covered on the stove. A note sat on the counter. Warmed food. Call me if you need anything. He smiled faintly. He ate alone at the table, chewing slowly, replaying the day in his mind. Not with regret. With wonder. He had been so close. So close to letting anger decide again. So close to blowing up years of work in minutes. Later, after showering, Ayan sat on the edge of the bed in the dim light. The house was still. No TV. No phone. Just space to think. That's when the realization came fully into focus. Anger promises relief but delivers regret. He had lived that truth for most of his life. He had shouted and felt powerful for moments, only to deal with consequences for years. Broken trust. Missed opportunities. Strained relationships. Calm, on the other hand, felt uncomfortable at first. It felt like swallowing words. Like standing still when instinct screamed to move. But calm built something anger never could. A future. He thought about his son, who had hugged him earlier that evening without hesitation. About his wife, who no longer measured her words around him. About co-workers who now trusted him under pressure. None of that came from being the loudest person in the room. It came from restraint. From awareness. From choosing response over reaction, again and again. Ayan lay back and stared at the ceiling, the room dark except for a thin line of streetlight through the curtains. He didn't feel proud in a loud way. There was no rush. No victory speech in his head. He felt steady. Tomorrow there would be new problems. New mistakes. New moments where anger would knock hard and demand entry. He knew that. But he also knew something else now. Anger didn't own him anymore. He closed his eyes, breathing slow and even, carrying that truth with him into sleep. Calm had not made him weak. It had saved everything. One evening, months later, Ayan found himself walking without a destination. The day had been long but not heavy. Work had its usual problems, home had its usual noise, life moved the way life always did. Nothing dramatic. Nothing urgent. Just a quiet restlessness he couldn't explain. His feet carried him through familiar streets without effort. Past shops closing for the night. Past the tea stall where steam rose into the cooling air. Past the side street where everything had almost gone wrong. He slowed down without realizing it. There it was. The bench. Same metal slats. Same worn paint. Same slight tilt to one side like it had given up trying to be perfect a long time ago. Time had passed but the place felt unchanged. The streetlight above it flickered softly, casting uneven shadows on the ground. Ayan stood there for a moment, then sat. The metal was cool against his back. He rested his hands on his knees and let out a long breath. Not a tired one. A reflective one. He hadn't planned to come here. But something inside him had remembered. He thought about that evening. The heat. The shouting. The old man's tired eyes. How close he had come to becoming someone else's regret. He wondered where the old man was now. Whether he still came here. Whether he ever thought about the strangers he had stopped with a few simple words. Ayan hoped he was at peace. A sharp voice cut through his thoughts. What do you mean you didn't back me up? Ayan turned his head. A few steps away, a young boy stood near the curb, phone pressed tightly to his ear. Late teens, maybe early 20s. Thin shoulders tense with anger. One foot kicked at a loose stone again and again. You always do this, the boy snapped into the phone. You never listen. His voice cracked slightly, then hardened again. He paced in short, aggressive steps, free hands slicing the air as if the person on the other end could see it. Ayan felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger. Recognition. He watched quietly as the boy's frustration grew. Words spilled out faster now, sharper, less controlled. The argument clearly wasn't about whatever started it. It had turned into something bigger. Pride. Hurt. Fear dressed up as rage. The boy pulled the phone away and stared at the screen, breathing hard. Then he shouted at it again even though the call had clearly ended. Unbelievable. He shoved the phone into his pocket and ran a hand through his hair, pacing again. His jaw was clenched so tight Ayan could see the muscles jump. Ayan smiled sadly. Not because the moment was funny, but because it felt painfully familiar. That fire. He knew it well. Had fed it for years. Had mistaken it for strength, for confidence, for identity. Without rushing, Ayan stood up and walked over. He kept a respectful distance. No sudden movements. No authoritative tone. Just a calm presence. I know that fire, Ayan said gently. The boy looked up, startled, eyes flashing with irritation. Sorry, he said, defensive already. Ayan nodded slightly, acknowledging the reaction. The one you're feeling right now, he said. It burns fast. And it burns you first. The boy frowned, clearly confused. Suspicious. What are you talking about? He asked. Ayan didn't answer right away. He remembered how resistance felt. How lectures bounced off him like rain on armor. I used to feel it all the time, Ayan said instead. Thought it made me strong. The boy scoffed lightly. So what, I'm supposed to just not care? Ayan smiled, small and patient. That's what I thought too. He glanced back at the bench for a moment, then returned his attention to the boy. Anger feels like control, Ayan continued. But it usually shows up because something underneath is hurting. The boy shifted his weight, uncomfortable now. He didn't walk away, but he didn't relax either. I don't need therapy from a stranger, he muttered. Ayan nodded. Fair enough. He could have stopped there. Should have, maybe. But something in the boy's eyes reminded him too much of himself to walk away completely. I won't push, Ayan said. Just remember this one thing. The boy sighed, impatient. What? Never get angry, Ayan said quietly. Nothing good comes from it. The words hung between them. The boy stared at him, clearly unconvinced. That's stupid, he said. People walk all over you if you don't get angry. Ayan didn't argue. I used to believe that, he replied. Turns out the opposite was true for me. The boy studied his face, searching for something. Mockery. Judgment. An agenda. He didn't seem to find it. Whatever, the boy said finally, though his tone had softened slightly. Thanks, I guess. He stepped back, then hesitated. You really don't get angry anymore? He asked. Ayan smiled. Oh, I do, he said. I just don't let it drive. The boy nodded slowly, not fully understanding but not dismissing it either. Then he turned and walked away, phone already back in his hand, head lowered, steps slower than before. Ayan watched him go. He didn't expect a transformation. Didn't expect gratitude or agreement. He knew better now. Some lessons don't land right away. They sit quietly. They wait. Ayan returned to the bench and sat down again. The street had grown quieter. The tea stall owner wiped down his counter. A cat slipped between parked cars. Ayan leaned back and looked up at the sky. Only a few stars visible through the city haze, but enough. He thought about the boy. About himself years ago. About how many times he had ignored advice that was ahead of its time for him. He smiled again, this time without sadness. Seeds were planted. They always are. You don't see them grow. You don't control when they take root. You just offer them and let time do the rest. Ayan stood up and stretched lightly. His body felt looser these days. Not tense in the way it used to be. His mind felt quieter too. As he walked away from the bench, he glanced back once more. The place no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a marker. A reminder of where he had been and how far he had come. Anger hadn't disappeared from his life. But it no longer defined it. And now, without trying to be a teacher or a hero, he had passed something on. Not perfectly. Not forcefully. Just honestly. Some lessons take time to grow. But seeds were planted. And for Ayan that was enough. Looking back, Ayan could clearly see the cost of anger. It wasn't one single moment. It wasn't one big mistake he could point to and say, that's where everything went wrong. It was a trail. A long, messy trail stretching back through years of his life, made up of moments that felt small at the time but heavy in hindsight. Broken relationships. He thought of friends he used to laugh with in his 20s. Late nights, shared plans, promises that felt solid back then. Slowly, one by one, those friendships faded. Not because of distance or time, but because conversations turned tense. Disagreements became personal. Jokes felt like attacks. People stopped calling, and he told himself it didn't matter. But it had mattered. He remembered the look on one friend's face after a fight that never really got resolved. The silence that followed. The awkward politeness months later when they ran into each other by chance. The unspoken truth hanging between them. Missed opportunities. Ayan could list them now with painful clarity. Jobs he was qualified for but never offered. Projects he should have led but didn't. Moments when someone higher up had clearly hesitated before choosing him, then chosen someone else. Back then he blamed politics. Bias. Weak leadership. Now he saw it differently. People hadn't doubted his ability. They had doubted his reactions. They hadn't trusted what would happen when things went wrong. Sleepless nights. He remembered lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying arguments in his head. Imagining better comebacks. Sharper words. Scenarios where he won. His body exhausted, but his mind racing, fueled by unresolved anger that refused to settle. Even victories felt hollow. Even when he was technically right, peace never followed. Just more tension. More distance. Endless regret. That one hurt the most. Regret over words spoken too quickly. Over moments he couldn't rewind. Over times he saw hurt in someone's eyes and chose pride over apology. Over being present physically but absent emotionally, especially at home. He remembered his son as a toddler, flinching slightly when voices rose. His wife going quiet instead of arguing back. The air in the house growing thick and careful. At the time he had called it respect. Now he knew it had been fear. Ayan sat quietly one evening, alone in the living room, the lights dim, the house finally still. His son was asleep. His wife was reading in bed. Outside, the city hummed softly, distant and indifferent. He let himself feel it all. Not with self-hate. Not with excuses. Just honesty. Anger had taken more than it had ever given. Then he thought about what calm had brought into his life. Respect. Not the forced kind. Not the kind built on intimidation or volume. Real respect. The kind that shows up when people speak freely around you. When they trust you with truth. When they don't brace themselves for your reaction. At work, people now came to him with problems instead of avoiding him. They didn't sugarcoat. They didn't hide mistakes. They knew he would listen first. That respect felt different. Quieter. Stronger. Clarity. Calm had cleared his vision in ways he never expected. Without anger clouding every situation, he could finally see what actually mattered. What needed a response and what deserved to be ignored. He stopped fighting every battle. Stopped reacting to every comment. Stopped carrying unnecessary weight. His thoughts felt sharper now. More organized. Less cluttered. Decisions came easier when emotion wasn't driving the wheel. Control. For most of his life he thought control meant domination. Raising his voice. Being the loudest in the room. Making sure no one crossed him. Now he understood control was internal. It was the ability to pause. To choose. To not be dragged by impulse into moments he would later regret. He still felt anger. That never went away completely. But it no longer owned him. He owned the space between feeling and action. That space changed everything. Not constant happiness. Not a perfect life. The kind that lets you sleep at night without replaying arguments. The kind that allows silence to feel safe instead of threatening. The kind that shows up in small moments. Eating dinner without tension. Driving without clenched fists. Listening without preparing a defense. Peace was subtle, but once he felt it, he knew he never wanted to lose it again. Life didn't become easier. Deadlines still piled up. People still made mistakes. Traffic was still terrible. Disagreements still happened. His son still tested boundaries. His marriage still required effort. Problems didn't disappear. But the way he faced them had changed. He faced them with a steady mind instead of burning fists. When something went wrong, his first question was no longer, "Who's to blame?" It became, "What needs to be done?" When someone criticized him, he no longer felt the immediate need to defend. He listened. Sometimes the criticism was unfair. Sometimes it wasn't. Either way he responded, not reacted. When fear showed up, he noticed it. Named it. Sat with it instead of covering it with anger. That didn't make him passive. It made him effective. One evening, his son asked him a question that stopped him in his tracks. "Dad," he said, lying on the floor with his homework spread around him, "were you always this calm?" Ayan smiled. "No," he said honestly. "I wasn't." "What changed?" his son asked. Ayan thought about it. About the road. The old man. The bench. The choices that followed. "I learned that being angry all the time was costing me more than it was giving me," he said. "And I didn't want to pay that price anymore." His son nodded, as if that made sense in a way only children can accept. Later that night, Ayan stood on the balcony looking out at the city lights. He felt older than he used to. But also lighter. Not because life was easier, but because he wasn't fighting everything anymore. He thought about the man he had been. That man wasn't evil. He wasn't broken beyond repair. He was scared. Insecure. Trying to protect himself with the only tool he thought he had. Anger had been his armor. But armor worn too long doesn't just protect. It isolates. Taking it off had been uncomfortable. Vulnerable. Sometimes painful. But it had allowed him to move freely again. To connect. To breathe. Ayan knew the journey wasn't over. It never would be. There would be days he slipped. Moments he reacted instead of responded. Times he raised his voice when he didn't mean to. But now he noticed. And noticing changed everything. He had learned something simple but powerful. Anger promises strength, but delivers regret. Calm feels risky at first, but it builds a life you can actually live in. Looking back, Ayan didn't wish his past away. Those years had taught him something he could only understand now. And looking forward, he felt ready. Not fearless, but steady. And that made all the difference. Here is the truth most people learn too late. Ayan learned it slowly, painfully, one moment at a time. For years, anger had felt like fuel, like electricity in his veins. In the moment, it made him feel alive, alert, in control. It pushed his chest forward and tightened his fists and told him, "You're not weak. You're not small. You won't be ignored." Anger spoke loudly inside him. It promised protection, respect, relief. And in the moment, it delivered something that felt close enough to those things that he kept believing in it. But only later did he understand the cost. Anger feels powerful in the moment, but it leaves you powerless in the end. It steals your words. Ayan remembered arguments where he said things he never meant to say. Words chosen not to explain but to wound. Words that landed and stayed there, long after the heat of the moment passed. "I didn't mean it like that," he had said so many times. But words don't rewind. Once spoken, they stand on their own. They echo. They linger. They reshape relationships quietly, even when apologies come later. He had lost the ability to speak with care when anger took over. Lost the chance to say what actually mattered. It steals your choices. When anger took the wheel, Ayan didn't choose anymore. He reacted. Automatically. Predictably. The same raised voice. The same sharp tone. The same explosive energy. In those moments, it felt like action. In reality, it was surrender. Surrender to impulse. To habit. To a version of himself that was always 10 seconds away from regret. Looking back, he could see how often anger made decisions for him. Decisions that didn't serve his future. Decisions that closed doors instead of opening them. It steals your future. This was the hardest truth to accept. Anger didn't just damage moments. It shaped trajectories. Ayan thought of where he might have been if he had learned earlier how to pause. How many relationships might still exist? How many opportunities might have grown instead of quietly disappearing? Anger didn't ruin his life all at once. It chipped away at it. Slowly. Consistently. Invisibly. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because you don't notice what's gone until you stop and look back. The strongest people are not those who shout the loudest or strike the hardest. Ayan used to believe strength was force. That the loudest voice won. That the angriest person controlled the room. He had been wrong. True strength showed up differently. He saw it in his manager during that failed deal. Calm. Focused. Unshaken. While everyone waited for chaos, calm took charge and saved the work of dozens of people. He saw it in his wife when she learned to stop engaging with his anger. How she protected her peace without raising her voice. How steady she remained even when things were tense. He saw it in the old man on the bench. Thin voice. Gentle posture. But a presence that stopped violence with a single sentence. Strength wasn't loud. It was steady. They are the ones who can pause, breathe, and choose calm when chaos invites anger. That pause changed everything. Ayan learned that pause was not weakness. It was space. Space to decide who he wanted to be in the next moment. In that pause, anger lost its urgency. Fear softened. Perspective returned. Sometimes the pause lasted seconds. Sometimes it lasted a long walk. Sometimes it lasted an entire night of silence. But in that pause he reclaimed choice. And choice is power. So remember this story when your chest tightens. Because it always starts there. That sudden pressure. That heat rising. That feeling of being challenged, disrespected, unseen. Ayan still felt it sometimes. In meetings. In traffic. In small misunderstandings that brushed against old insecurities. The body remembers before the mind catches up. When your hands shake. When adrenaline floods your system and your fingers curl without permission. When your jaw tightens and your shoulders rise. These are not signs of danger. They are signals. Signals that something inside you feels threatened. When your mind screams to react. When thoughts race ahead, crafting insults, defenses, imagine victories. When your inner voice tells you to strike first. To dominate. To prove something. That voice sounds convincing. Urgent. It tells you action is required now. But Ayan learned to question it. What happens if I wait? What happens if I don't react? What happens if I choose calm instead? One moment of control can save a lifetime of regret. He had seen it happen. On a road that could have ended in violence. In a meeting that could have destroyed his career. In countless small moments at home where silence and patience kept bonds intact. One moment. That's all it takes. Not perfection. Not endless patience. Just one moment where you choose differently. Never get angry. Not because anger is evil, but because it is expensive. Because it asks for more than it ever gives back. Because it promises power and delivers loss. Ayan understood now that this wasn't about suppressing feelings or pretending nothing hurt. It was about recognizing anger for what it truly was. Fear wearing armor. And once you see it, you don't need to fight it. You can simply set it down. Because peace is the real power. Peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't intimidate. It doesn't demand attention. It builds quietly. In how you speak. In how you listen. In how you sleep at night without replaying battles in your head. Peace allows you to think clearly when others panic. To act wisely when others react. To walk away without feeling small. Peace gives you something anger never could. A future you don't regret living. And that is the truth most people learn too late. But you don't have to.